Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. We've been getting ready for the upcoming fishing season, doing some maintenance on our rods and reels, and today I wanted to give you a few tips on selection of fishing line. Stay tuned, this one's going to be a good one. Now there's generally three types of fishing line. You've got braided fishing line, and it comes in all kinds of different colors, different size diameters. This one's from Beyond Braid, but there's all kinds of vendors out there that make braided fishing line. You've got fluorocarbon. Fluorocarbon fishing line comes from different vendors. There's all kinds of different ones out there that make fluorocarbon. And then you've got the good old general purpose monofilament fishing line. Now, monofilament comes in different colors. You've got clear, blue, fluorescent blue, green, and again, from all types of different vendors. This is from Vicious Fishing for that monofilament fishing line. Now, if you're just getting started bass fishing, there's two of these lines I'm going to take off the table and kind of put on the back burner for right now, and that's braid and fluorocarbon. And they're both more expensive than monofilament. And for those purposes, I'm going to put those off to the side for a second, and we'll start by talking about monofilament. Now, monofilament line is going to be your cheapest. And when you're just starting out fishing, you're going to have a bunch of backlashes, tangles. You're going to get hung up and break off. And for those purposes, I would stick with monofilament fishing line just because it's an all around good general purpose line, and it's much cheaper on your wallet. And when you start buying a lot of fishing line, you're going to find out real quick braid and fluorocarbon are much more expensive. Now, monofilament fishing line is a floating line, and so it will actually float. And so for those reasons, it's probably best used when you're fishing top water. And you can weight the line and it will sink, but it does want to float back up. But again, and it has some stretch in the line, right? So it's a little more forgiving. You can kind of see the stretch in that line. I'm not pulling any extra line off the spool. It actually has a stretch to it. And so for those reasons, when you get hung up, a lot of times you can pull up some line in your hand and kind of snap that line off. And it will help you get unhung. That's just another quick tip that you can use when you're fishing with monofilament fishing line. And a lot of folks use monofilament for leader material on when they're fishing braid because braid doesn't have any give to it at all. But I would stick with monofilament fishing line when you're just starting out fishing, or when you're using your top water line or your top water baits. And again, because you have this line floats when you're using your top water baits, it doesn't want to sink down and then make your top water bait tip down. So, like if you're using something that's set still on top of the water, like a spook or a popper, and you're trying to pause that bait and keep it still on top of the water, braid or fluorocarbon will sink. Those lines sink, and that'll cause your bait to tip down. So for those reasons, I like to use monofilament when I'm doing topwater fishing, or if I'm fishing with braid and I'm trying to use a leader material. That's something that you might want to do after you've had some experience, gained some experience, and had some time using monofilament line to move to a braid with a monofilament leader. So I would stick with monofilament line when you're first starting out. It's going to be easier on your pocketbook. It's a little bit better general purpose line, and you don't have to worry so much about breaking off and cutting a bunch of tangles and backlashes out of your reels and spending a whole bunch of money to replace that line. Now the next fishing line we're going to talk about is braid. And braided fishing line, again, it does not float. It wants to sink. And braided fishing line has no give whatsoever. So unlike monofilament line, it has no stretch at all. So you go from a very stretchy line to no stretch. And for those reasons, I like to use braided fishing line when I'm flipping or when I'm punching, or if I'm fishing through some thick vegetation. And that line will actually cut through that vegetation and help you get those lures back out or get that fish in when you get hung up or you hook up in vegetation. Now, one area I do not like to use braid is around wood, because that braided line has no stretch. If you get looped around a tree limb or a stump or something, and you pull back to get unhung, that braid is going to cut into that wood, and you're going to have to go in there and get that out, by hand, or you're going to have to cut your line and retie. So for those reasons, I like to use braid when I'm fishing vegetation, matted vegetation, punching, flipping, things like that. This is a really good line to use for those reasons. Again, more expensive, but has its particular use and time when you're out there on the water. But again, if you're just starting out, stick with monofilament. Okay, the last fishing line we're going to talk about is fluorocarbon. This is Seagar fluorocarbon. Now, fluorocarbon has a little bit of stretch in it, but not nearly as much as monofilament, but does have a little stretch in it, unlike braid, which has no stretch at all. And for the most part, fluorocarbon is clear, so you can. It's really hard to see that line. I'll put it up there, but in water, it's really clear. And so for those reasons, it's really good for any bottom bait. So if you're Texas rigging, Carolina rigging, jig fishing, on crankbaits, I like to use it on deeper running crankbaits. Sometimes on a shallow crankbait, shallow running crankbait, I will use monofilament just because it has a little bit of give. And then it really depends on like how fast tip of rod I'm using. But for the purpose of this video, again, we won't get too deep into that because you can differentiate the combinations between line and rod tip power and speed based on what kind of conditions you're fishing and what type of fish you're trying to catch. But again, fluorocarbon, it sinks, has a little bit of stretch, unlike monofilament, which is real stretchy, and unlike braid, which has no stretch at all. Very clear line, very hard to see in the water. And for those reasons, it makes it really good when you're finesse fishing for like finicky fish or in those tough conditions like those bluebird sky days or blue sky days when post frontal activity is very sluggish and the fish don't really want to bite. That's when I'll really move to fluorocarbon to kind of get every opportunity I can to catch those fish. So those are the three types of fishing line that we covered today. Again, we got braid, no stretch. Use it for like flipping, pitching, fishing in vegetation. Use your braided fishing line. Fluorocarbon for your bottom baits when you're cranking deep cranking baits, jig fishing, Texas or Carolina rigging. I would use fluorocarbon. And then if you're just getting started out fishing and you want an all around good general purpose line, but not spend a whole bunch of money on fish bait or on fishing line, I would use monofilament. Very stretchy. It's more forgiving. It will float, but you can also use it with a weight, and you can make it sink. But again, that's what I would start out with and what I would stick with until I get comfortable fishing, get a little experience underneath my belt, and then you can start to experiment with different types of fishing line. Okay, listen, I'm going to leave a video, or actually a link up above to some of our other how-to videos here at RC Bassin Nation, so you can go over and check those out. And as always, if you're not a member of the RC Bassin Nation yet, all you have to do is hit subscribe to become a member. Leave a comment below, give us a thumbs up, and really appreciate all your time and taking time out of your busy schedules to watch these videos. All right, until we get to talk again, stay safe out on the water, tight lines, and you know how we do here at RC Bassin. Hook 'em up.